वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जन रंजना। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जन रंजना। यमुना तीरावनचारी। यमुना तीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी। जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जन रंजना। यमुना तीरावनचारी। यमुना तीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी। जय राधा माधवा कुंज विहारी। जय कृष्ण रुक्मिणी जय सत्यभामा। कृष्ण रुक्मिणी जय सत्यभामा। जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय। गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय। जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 प्रभुपाद। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्-भागवतम की जय। श्री श्री कृष्ण रुक्मिणी सत्यभामा की जय। श्री श्री गौरनिताय की जय। जगत गुरु शील प्रभुपाद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, verse number 9. Devahutirvacha Prakritehe Purushasya Api Prakritehe Purushasyapi Prakritehe Purushasyapi Lakshanam Purushottama Lakshanam Purushottama Lakshanam Purushottama Bruhi Karanayoho Asya Bruhi Karanayorasya Bruhi Karanayorasya Sat Asat Cha Yad Atmakam Sadasatcha Yadatmakam Sadasatcha Yadatmakam Devahutirvacha Prakritehe Purushasyapi Lakshanam Purushottama Bruhi Karanayorasya Sadasatcha Yadatmakam Devahutirvacha Prakritehe Purushasyapi Lakshanam Purushottama Bruhi Karanayorasya Sadasatcha Yadatmakam. Devahutihi Uvacha. Devahuti said, Prakritehe, of his energies, Purushasya, of the Supreme Person, Api, also, Lakshanam, characteristics, Purusha Uttama, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bruhi, kindly explain, Karanayoho, causes, Asya, of this creation, Sat, Asat, manifest and unmanifest, Cha, and Yat Atmakam, consisting of which. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and His energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. Kindly repeat. Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and His energies, for both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Prakriti or material nature is connected with both the Supreme Lord and the living entities Just as a woman is connected with her husband as a wife and with her children as a mother. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that He impregnates material nature with children, living entities, and thereafter all species of living entities become manifest. The relationship of all living entities with material nature has been explained. Now, an understanding of the relationship between material nature and the Supreme Lord is sought by Devahuti. The product of that relationship is stated to be the manifest and unmanifest material world. The unmanifest material world is the subtle Mahatattva, and from that Mahatattva, the material manifestation has emerged. In the Vedic literatures, it is said that by the glance of the Supreme Lord, the total material energy is impregnated, and then everything is born of material nature. It is also confirmed in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that under his glance, Adhyakshena, under his direction and by his will, nature is working. It is not that nature works blindly. After understanding the position of the conditioned souls in relation to material nature, Devahuti wanted to know how nature works under the direction of the Lord and what the relationship is between the material nature and the Lord. In other words, she wanted to hear the characteristics of the Supreme Lord in relation to material nature. The relationship of the living entities with matter and that of the Supreme Lord with matter are certainly not on the same level, although the Mayavadis may interpret it in that way. When it is said that the living entities are bewildered, the Mayavadi philosophers ascribe this bewilderment to the Supreme Lord, but that is not applicable. The Lord is never bewildered. That's the difference between personalists and impersonalists. Devahuti is not unintelligent. She has enough intelligence to understand that the living entities are not on the level of the Supreme Lord. Because the living entities are infinitesimal, they become bewildered or conditioned by material nature. But this does not mean that the Supreme Lord is also conditioned or bewildered. The difference between the conditioned soul and the Lord is that the Lord is the Lord, the master of material nature, and he is therefore not subject to its control. He is controlled neither by spiritual nature nor by material nature. He is the supreme controller himself, and he cannot be compared to the ordinary living entities who are controlled by the laws of material nature. Two words used in this verse are Sat and Asat. The cosmic manifestation is Asat, it does not exist. But the material energy of the Supreme Lord is Sat, or ever existing. Material nature is ever existing in its subtle form as the energy of the Lord, but it sometimes manifests this non-existent or temporary existent nature, the cosmos. An analogy may be made with the father and mother. The mother and the father exist, but sometimes the mother begets children. Similarly, this cosmic manifestation, which comes from the unmanifest material nature of the Supreme Lord, sometimes appears and again disappears. But the material nature is ever existing, and the Lord is the supreme cause for both the subtle and gross manifestations of this material world. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Recently I had gone to one temple of Lord Narasimha. It is situated in Madurai. It's quite famous there, as the place is famous as Narsimpatti. And there is a hillock. It's called Yanamalai, because the hillock is shaped, if you see from the side, it appears like the head of an elephant. It is believed that Rishabhadeva, when he wound up his pastimes, there was a forest fire in which he quit his body. That they say happened at the foothills of this Yanamalai. Mahaprabhu also visited this place during his tour of South India. This Narasimha temple, the Narasimha is unique because there is a big deity of Narasimha, and he has emerged or manifested, self-manifested from the hillock. So the temple, if you see, the altar goes and hits the hillock. You cannot go around the altar because it is on the hillock. The deity Narasimha has come out, emerged out of the rock itself. So it's a beautiful temple. And outside the temple, there is one pond. Normally, every temple has a pond associated with it. And that pond is famous as Gajendra Moksha. They say that the Gajendra Moksha Leela happened in that pond. Of course, according to Bhagavatam, the Gajendra Moksha happened in one of the upper planetary systems, not on this earth. But there are many Leelas of Narasimha which also have a reflection on this earth. So we can consider it like that, that the Gajendra Moksha pastime which happened in the upper planetary system, a reflection of that is there on this earth, in this place. Just like Vrindavan is the, Goloka Vrindavan is the spiritual world, but it has got a reflection on this earth also, which is the Vrindavan, which is situated in Uttar Pradesh. So in this pond, if we go to that temple, just outside the pond, next to the pond, there will be a person sitting and selling muri. And if you go there, he will tell you, buy some muri for the fish. And many people buy that muri and then they sprinkle it in the water, and you can see fish coming and eating that muri. So there are a lot of fish in that pond. And that pond is full of lotuses. You can see a lot of lotus plants and the lotus flowers coming out. It's a very beautiful place. In the Nectar of Devotion, in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is a work written by Srila Rupa Goswami, one of the 6 direct disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 6 prominent disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami has described the different rasas, the different mellows of devotional service, different stages of progressing on devotional service, and very intricate and complex aspects of bhakti or devotional service are explained in this literature. In the beginning of this Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami, first in the introduction, he offers his obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and all that, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then he also offers his respects to all the devotees with a beautiful verse, very wonderful verse. So he says, Rupa Goswami says, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhau Charataha, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhau Charataha. So all the devotees are swimming in the ocean of bhakti. Bhakti Rasa, the mellows of devotional service. So Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Sindhu means the ocean. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhau Charataha. All the devotees are swimming in that ocean of the mellows of devotional service. So he says, Paribhuta Kala Jala Bhiyaha. So these devotees who are swimming in that Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Charataha Paribhuta Kala Jala Bhiyaha. So the Kala Jala, Kala, time has cast a net, and every living entity is captured by that net of Kala, of time. Nobody is free from this net of Kala. This Kala Jala, this net of time, the force of time is spread everywhere. You look at this material world. Nobody is free from the influence of time. And everybody is afraid of this changing force of time. And everybody is undertaking various attempts, various measures they are undertaking in order to withstand the force of time. What is the force of time? The force of time, the inexorable force of time brings about change everywhere. Nobody wants change. Everybody wants steadiness. But the force of time is so inexorable that it will unfailingly bring about changes in everyone's life. Nobody wants to become old, but you cannot help it. You have to become old. Nobody wants to become diseased. You have to get diseased. Nobody is there in this material world who is completely free of all diseases. All through his life, he lived a life free of any disease. Not possible. Even if suppose there is someone like that, ultimately one has to die. Nobody can live eternally. Therefore, this force of time brings about this change, various changes in our lives, which nobody can stop. There is nobody who can withstand. But everybody is engaged in various measures, thinking that something what they are doing will help them to at least pause or reduce the impact of the force of time. Somebody is saving money, somebody is using political power, somebody is using medical science, somebody is using military power, diplomacy, economic development. All these attempts are what? Actually trying to stop the juggernaut of time. But the reality is, it is impossible to stop. No civilization has managed to withstand the force of time. So at the individual level, at the family level, at the community level, at the social level, at the national level, at the international level, everywhere, everybody is individually and in groups trying to withstand the force of time, trying to negate the force of time. Different people will create different associations. There will be a medical association, there will be a physicist association, there will be a mathematicians association, there will be a businessmen's association, there will be political associations, and at the international level you have the United Nations. So everybody at the individual level and in a collective way, there is attempts to block or to negate the force of time, but nobody is free from that force of time. So the net of time is spread everywhere. Kala Jala, the Kala Jala is spread everywhere. And because of that, Kala Jala Bhiyaha, everyone is afraid of the force of time. No matter how much we may try, we cannot stop time for progressing even for a second. 1 second I want to stop time, pause time. Can you do it? Not possible. Inexorably, time will go on. You cannot even stop even 1 second of time from progressing. That's the power of time. So everyone is afraid of that force of time. So, but then, Paribhuta Kala Jala Bhiyaha, the devotees of Krishna are Paribhuta. They have transcended the sphere of the net of time. Only the devotees of Krishna can actually transcend the fear of time. Otherwise, everybody is caught up in this. And then Rupa Goswami says, Bhakta Makaran, the devotees are like sharks. They are like the whales in the ocean. Bhakta Makaran, Ashilita Mukti Nadikan Namasyami. So he says, I offer my obeisances, Namasyami, to all those great devotees and acharyas who are like sharks in the ocean. And these sharks in the ocean, Mukti Nadikan, Ashilitaha, they have no consideration, they are not bothered in the least about the rivers of liberation. So, Rupa Goswami is comparing the different processes. There are many processes which people undertake to get liberation, to get moksha, to get mukti. Like we see so many people, crores of people going to Kumbh Mela and taking a dip in Sangam. Why? Because if you take a dip in the Sangam, during that Kumbh Mela time, you will get moksha, you will get mukti. Then there are jnanis who are engaged in deep study of the Upanishads and the Vedantas. What is their idea? They want to get free They want to get liberated. They want to get mukti, moksha from this material life. Then there are great yogis who are undergoing great tapasya. Again in the Kumbh Mela, we saw all kinds of yogis, all kinds of tapasvis coming to the Kumbh Mela. Somebody was making a remark, Shri Krishna Rukmini Satyabhama ki. Normally we don't get to see these sadhus, but during Kumbh Mela, you don't know from where thousands and thousands of these sadhus are descending upon Kumbh Mela. And after the Kumbh Mela, they'll disappear. So they are not part of our regular life. You don't see them roaming around in the streets of the cities. Why? Because they are engaged in deep tapasya, somewhere in the Himalayas, somewhere in the forests. Why? Because they want to attain mukti, moksha. So there are many processes, many methods, many yoga paths by which one may attain liberation. Rupa Goswami is comparing all those paths which a person may attempt to attain liberation like rivers. And all these yogis and jnanis and karma yogis who are all attempting to attain liberation through their different processes, they are compared to aquatics who live within the rivers. In the river also there are many fishes. You see, like in that pond, in that Narasimha temple, there are many fishes. Now, you will find fishes in ponds also. You will find bigger fishes in lakes. And if you go to rivers, there are even bigger fishes. Now, all the rivers, without fail, flow towards the ocean. So, some of these fishes which are in the ponds, lakes, somehow they may find their way into a river. And the aquatics which are in the river, they may somehow find their way into an ocean. But the aquatics which are living within the ocean, the great sharks, whales, and these kind of big fish, they will never migrate to the river. They will always remain in the ocean. The fish which is living in that small pond in that Narasimha temple, it will have no idea that there are big fish living within the ocean. It will be thinking one of the big, there also there will be small fish and big fish. The big fish will be thinking there, I am the king, I am the biggest fish. So somehow, if some fish is fortunate in that which is engaged in that river of liberation, it may finally reach the ocean. And it has no idea what is there in the ocean. It may be very proud and puffed up, thinking that I am the king of this river. But when it comes to the ocean, it is very insignificant. Because there are huge fish, whales and sharks which are within the waters of the ocean. So these sharks and whales are compared to the devotees. Bhakta Makaran. And these Bhakta Makaras, these whales and sharks of devotees, they always live in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. They live in the ocean of the mellows of devotional service to Krishna. They are never interested in the various paths of liberation. They are not interested in yoga. They are not interested in jnana. They are not interested in karma. They are not interested in any of these things. So therefore, Ashilita Mukti Nadikan, they are not interested in the rivers of liberation, rivers of mukti or moksha. So this is a beautiful analogy given by Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So he has given a beautiful comparison to make us understand the position of devotees, and he then offers his obeisances to such devotees before commencing the work on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about two kinds of living entities. Krishna says, Dvavimau purushau loke, aksharachakshara yevacha, ksharaha sarvani bhutani, kutasto akshara uchyate. Krishna says, Dvavimau purushau loke. There are two kinds of purushas within this material world or within this entire creation. Dvavimau purushau. There are two kinds of living entities. There are two kinds of purushas. Who are they? Kshara akshara yevacha. Ksharacha akshara yevacha. One is called kshara and another is called akshara. What is kshara? Kshara means fallible. Those who are prone to fall down. Fall down where? To the material world. And the other class of living entities is called akshara. those who will never fall down. And Ksharaha Sarvani Bhutani Loke. Within this material world, whatever living entities you see, they are all Kshara. And Kutastaha Akshara Uchyate. Those who are firmly situated in their original constitutional position, in their spiritual identity, those living entities are called Akshara. So Krishna gives this definition. He clearly distinguishes about these two kinds of living entities, these two kinds of Purushas. And Krishna in the 13th chapter also talks about another thing. Krishna says about these Purushas, Purushaha prakritistohi bhunkte prakritijan gunan. So Krishna says the Purusha, the living entity, is prakritistaha. He is situated within Prakriti, within the material nature. All the living entities within this material creation, we are all situated within material nature. We have to function within the ambit of material nature, material energy. We may invent many wonderful things, we may discover so many things, we may be able to manipulate the laws of material nature and invent wonderful aeroplanes and rockets and nuclear bombs and electricity and so many things we may invent. But all of them have to work within the laws of material nature. You cannot overcome the laws of material nature. You can manipulate the laws of material nature. So all the living entities that we see within the material creation, they are all working within the ambit of material nature. Prakritistohi bhunkte prakritijar gunan. And he is trying to lord it over material nature. Everyone is trying to control material nature. So bhunkte prakritijan gunan. And he is trying to do this under the influence of the three modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, passion and ignorance, sattva-guna, rajoguna and tamoguna. Under the influence of this, he is trying to do all this lording over material nature. And then Krishna says that, all these living entities, they are born into this material nature and undergo repeated birth and death because of the influence of the three modes of material nature. So, the living entities working within this material nature are controlled by material nature to undertake repeated birth and death and undertake activities, engaged in various activities by the force, by the influence of the three modes of material nature. And then Krishna says that there is another kind of living entity. Krishna says that this living entity is Upadrashtanumantacha Bharta Bhokta Maheshwaraha. So there is another living entity who is not controlled by material nature. He is not engaged in activities in the material nature. Prakritistohi gunan. So the one kind of living entity, Purusha, is engaged in various activities under the influence of material nature. But then there is another living entity who is Upadrashta, who is simply a witness. He does not engage in material activity. He is simply witnessing what is going on. And Upadrashta Anumanta, he is also the sanctioner. He sanctions all the activities of the living entities who are under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Not only that, he is Bharta. He is the maintainer of both material nature as well as all the living entities. And Bhokta, he is the real enjoyer. One living entity is trying to exploit material nature and trying to enjoy, but he is actually what is happening. He is Karanam Gunasangosya. What is that? Karanam Gunasangosya Sadasad Yoni Janmasu. And he is having to take birth in good and bad conditions on account of the activities that he is engaged in contact with the three modes of material nature. But who is maintaining that material nature and the living entities? Bharta. There is another living entity who is Bharta, Bhokta, and he is the real enjoyer. We think we are the enjoyers, but what happens? We have to come in touch with distress and happiness which is beyond our control. We always strive to attain happiness, but eventually we will end up with distress. So this is beyond our control. So although we may try to be the enjoyer, we also have to suffer. But the other living entity is, he is Bhokta, he is always the enjoyer. And Maheshwaraha, he is the supreme controller, he is the actual controller, he is controlling everything. And this other living entity, Paramatmeti Chapyuktaha, he is called a Paramatma. We are called Atma because we are controlled by material nature, although we are referred to as Purusha, but we are a controlled Purusha. And Krishna is referring to Paramatma, who is there within the heart of Dehesmin Purushaha Paraha. He is also living within this same body as we are all living in. But he is called Paramatma. We are called Atma, he is called Paramatma because he is Upadrashta, Anumanta, Bharta, Bhokta, Maheshwara. And so therefore, Dehesmin Purushaha Paraha. He is the transcendental Supreme Personality. He is the transcendental Purusha. So why Krishna is making this distinction is because earlier in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna said that Apareyam itastu anyam prakriti vidhi me param jiva bhutam yayedam dharyate jagat. He says that all the living entities, which is all of us, we are all belonging to our characteristic or our constitutional position is to be Prakriti. That means we are all energy. We are not real Purusha. Although we are not really Purusha, but we are Prakriti, sometimes in the Vedic scriptures, we are also referred to as Purusha. Just like we see in the previous to today's verse, Kapila Deva, he referred, where is that verse? Today's verse is the 9th verse. So in the 8th verse, Kapila Deva referred to Karya Karana Kartrutve Karanam Prakritim Viduhu Bhoktrutve Sukadukkanam Purusham Prakrite Paraha. He referred to all the conditioned living entities as Purusha. You see, the living entity is also referred to as Purusha. But then the Paramatma is also referred to as Purusha, but the difference is the living entities who are Purusha are controlled by Prakriti. They are not controllers. They are not enjoyers. Whereas Paramatma, he is the enjoyer, he is the maintainer, and he is the controller, he is the witnesser, and he is the sanctioner. So you see, these 5 things are unique to Paramatma. And then Krishna says further, Krishna says, Yasmat ksharam atitoham aksharaadapi chottamaha atosmi loke vedecha pratita purushottamaha. Krishna speaks about himself. Krishna spoke about 2 kinds of Purushas. One is Kshara Purusha, one is Akshara Purusha. Kshara Purusha is the Purusha within this material world who is under the control of material nature. Another Akshara Purusha is the living entity who is liberated condition in the spiritual world. And the third kind of living entity Krishna spoke about in the 13th chapter, Krishna spoke about Paramatma, who is higher than the other Purusha who is liable to come under the control of material nature. And then now Krishna is talking about 4th person, which is himself. He says, Yasmat Sharam Matitoham. Krishna says, Krishna is beyond, he is superior to the Kshara Purusha, the living entities within this material world. And Ksharam Atitoham, Aksharaadapi Chottamaha. And he is even superior to the Akshara Purusha, the liberated living entities. He is superior to the conditioned living entities as well as to the liberated living entities. Mayavadis, they state, once you are liberated, you become the supreme. But Krishna is saying, Aksharad api chottamaha. Krishna is superior to even the liberated living entities. So Krishna is making a distinction between liberated living entities and himself. And then Krishna says, Atosmi loke vedecha. Therefore, in this world and in the entire Vedas, Pratita Purushottamaha, that Krishna says that he is glorified, he is celebrated as Purushottama in all the Vedic literature and in the entire creation. So Krishna has a position even beyond Paramatma. Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita that this entire manifestation, which is pervaded and being run and maintained by the Paramatma, that Paramatma is a small fraction of Krishna's opulence.
isn't it? Krishna says that also. So, the one is the living entity or Atma, who is the Purusha, who is also referred to as Purusha, although he is Prakriti. So, he is also referred to as Purusha. Why? Because he is actually Adama Purusha. Krishna is Purushottama. Pratitaha Purushottama, Loke Vedecha. In the Vedas and amongst all the people, Krishna is celebrated as Purushottama. Krishna is Purushottama. The living entities are also called Purusha, but what kind of Purusha are they? They are not Purushottama, they are Purusha Adhama. They are the lowest class of living entities. And amongst these living entities who are called Purusha, why are they called Purusha? Because they have the tendency to artificially try to become the controller and the enjoyer. So they cannot actually become the controller, they cannot become the enjoyer. They are actually Prakriti. They are the energy of Krishna. But then, because they are artificially trying to lord it over material nature, they are also referred to as Purusha or Purusha Adhama. That means they are imitation Purushas. They are not real Purushas. That is why the Vedic scriptures sometimes refer to the living entities also as Purusha. And then there is Paramatma, who is Madhyama Purusha. The Adama Purusha is the living entities, Madhyama Purusha is the Paramatma, and Purushottama is Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's not that only, so the Mayavadis, what they state is, there is Advitiyam Brahma, there is only one Brahman, and Advitiya, when they say Advitiya, they say that everything is one. So, how do they explain this material manifestation and our existence? They say all the living entities, actually we all don't exist. In illusion, we are thinking we are separate from the absolute truth. When you come to knowledge, you will realize you are that Supreme Brahman. You will merge into that Supreme Brahman. That sense of difference, of being a separate person will vanish. So, therefore, Advitiyam Brahma, they say. But what is our understanding? Our understanding is very simple. When we say Advitiya, it does not mean one. When the Brahman is referred to, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is referred to as Advitiya Brahman, it's like, for example, there is a Prime Minister of a country or a President of a country. So we say he is the Advitiya Prime Minister. He is the Advitiya Pradhana Mantri. That means he is the sole Prime Minister. If I say this is the Prime Minister and this is the Dvitiya Prime Minister. This is the Pradhana Mantri and this is the Dvitiya Pradhana Mantri. What does it mean? It means this is the first Prime Minister, this is the second Prime Minister. That means there are two Prime Ministers on an equal footing. That means there is competition. There are two people who are equals. If I say he is Advitiya Pradhana Mantri, that means he is the sole Prime Minister. That does not mean there are no other ministers, there are no other citizens. There are citizens, there are ministers, but Prime Minister is only one. This is what it means. So when we say Advitiya Brahman, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Advitiya Brahman, means he has no competition, he has no equal. Everybody else is subordinate to him. Which is what Krishna also saying in the Bhagavad Gita. That there are two kinds of Dvavimau Purusho Loke. There are two kinds of living entities who are also called Purusha. But Krishna is Sharadati Toham, Aksharadapi Chottamaha. He is superior to all kinds of living entities. He is superior even to Paramatma. So, okay, the living entities may be Prakriti. Krishna also says in the 7th chapter that all the living entities are Prakriti. They all belong to the category of the energy of Krishna. Then what about this material world which we are seeing, which is referred to as Asat in the Vedic scriptures? Here also the material world, material manifestation is referred to as Asat. Sadasatcha Yadatmakam. Asat means it has no real existence. It has no permanence. It is not significant. It is not substance. It is illusory or temporary. How do we understand this? So the Mayavadis, they state that Brahman Satya Jagan Mithya, this material manifestation which you are seeing with so many varieties, trees, plants, birds, hills, mountains, oceans, rivers, lakes, ponds, all these kind of things, This is all illusion. It actually doesn't exist. Like you see a movie. In a movie, you see many scenes, but they all don't exist in reality. Especially today, with CGI, you can create so many things on the screen, which actually haven't happened or don't exist. So, actually, if you look at the Upanishads, what do the Upanishads state? Na tasya karyam karanam cha vidyate, na tat samaschabhyadikascha drishyate, parasya shaktir vividaiva shuyate, swabhaviki jnana balakriyacha. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, na tasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. He is not bound by his actions to undergo the reactions of his activities like we all are. When we engage in any activity, there is either punya or papa associated with that, and in the future I have to either suffer or I have to enjoy the results. But when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Rama, Parasurama, all these avatars, they come to this material world and they execute different activities, leelas, pastimes. They are not bound by the reactions of those activities. And na tasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. He has no duty to perform. We living entities have duties to perform. But Krishna, the Supreme Lord, has no duty to perform. He is completely free. He is free of all obligations. And na tat samaschabhyadikasya drishyate. There is nobody equal to Krishna. There is nobody above Krishna. So he is Advitiya Brahman. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who has no equal, who has no superior. Everybody else is subordinate to him. And then parasya shaktir vividaiva shuyate. Of that Supreme Personality of Godhead, vividaiva shaktir, there are many, many energies of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we say Prakriti, there are many categories of Prakriti. One of the Prakritis, one of the energies of Krishna is the living entities. Another energy is that Jada Prakriti, this material world, which is temporary, and which has the manifestation of this material nature is temporary, but material nature itself is eternal. Prakriti is eternal, but the manifestations that we see, the earth, the sun, the stars, this universe itself, it is temporary, it has a lifespan. After a certain point of time, it will get wound up, annihilated. At that time, it will merge again back into the subtle form of material nature, which is known as Mahat-tattva and Pradhana. So you see, this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is one, but his energies are infinite. They are full of varieties. The conscious living entities, the unconscious material nature, and all other kinds of energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are working in tandem to create this material universe and give an experience to the living entities of trying artificially to become the controller and enjoyer. This is how this material world is created. This is how it is constituted. So, the material nature itself is permanent and eternal. It is true. That is why it is referred to as Sad. The subtle form of material nature is Sad, and its manifestations are Asat. And Devahuti is saying, Prakrutehe purushasyapi lakshanam purushottama. O Krishna, she is referring to her son, Kapila Deva, who is an avatara, incarnation of Krishna, as Purushottama. Because in the previous words, Kapila Deva stated that all the living entities who are under the control of material nature and who are undergoing different reactions on account of their activities, he referred to all of them as Purusha. So Devahuti is not making the mistake of assuming or categorizing Kapila Deva amongst those Purushas. So she is referring to him as Purushottama. And she is saying, Prakrutehe Purushasyapi Lakshanam. Kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies. So one kind of Purusha you have already explained. He as Kapila Deva has already explained. So that is the living entities and how they are controlled by material nature and how they can become liberated through the process of pure devotional service has been explained by Kapila Deva. Now Devahuti is saying, okay, I understood the relationship between material nature, matter and the Purusha, the living entity. Now Purushottama, I want to understand the relationship between matter and the Supreme Person. Because that's a different kind of relationship. As Krishna stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Bharta Bhokta Maheshwaraha. the relationship between matter and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer, and He is the enjoyer, He is the Supreme Controller, and He is the witnesser and sanctioner, as far as material nature is concerned. So she wants to understand the characteristic of the Supreme Person and His energies for both of these, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the material nature, Prakriti, are the cause of this manifest and unmanifest creation. So they together work. How do they together work? Krishna himself in the form of Mahavishnu, he glances over material nature, and material nature immediately starts producing the different kinds of, the varieties of manifestation that we get to see in this material universe. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead never comes in touch with material nature, with Prakriti. So what he does, he glances over Lakshmi Devi. And Lakshmi Devi in turn, she empowers material nature, Durga, which is subordinate to her, to immediately start the process of creation. So Vishnu never comes directly in touch with material nature. So all of us are within material nature. We are under the influence and control of material nature, but Krishna never even touches material nature. But still he is Bharta Bhokta Maheshwaraha. He is the supreme controller. For him to control material nature, he doesn't need some lot of ropes and chains and laws and struggling and trying to somehow control, and somewhere the material nature is going out of control and then he has to pull it back. He doesn't have to do all those things. Simply he glances, and by his glance, everything is done. By his will, everything is done. This is the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So all these things we will get to see as we go along, which will be explained by Kapila Deva. And Devahuti here is setting the background for all these explanations to come forth from her son, transcendental son, who is the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is Purushottama, and he will go ahead and explain the Lakshana, the characteristics of Purushasyapi Prakritehe, the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies, and how they bring about the creation of this material nature and its different manifestations. So we'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Vishwaguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.